Hello, everyone, and welcome. We are very excited that you're joining us this afternoon. We are here in celebration of the book, The Call of the Wild by author Jack London, as part of the National Endowment for the Arts Big Read programming. We are very excited to have our keynote speaker with us virtually today to share his experiences in the wild and talk about his new children's book, Wild Outside, Around the World with Survivorman. Our keynote, Les Stroud, is the creator of the survival TV genre, a world explorer, filmmaker, author, and musician, and newly named Chief Scouts of Canada. Please welcome Les Stroud.
Hi, everybody, and hi, Lynette.
Hi.
Thanks so much for being here, everyone. I'm sure some will be joining us over the next few minutes in that, so they'll miss a little bit of this intro. It's kind of strange. I was just sitting here thinking about how kind of incongruent this all is, that you're talking to myself with the reputation and the history that I have and the stories that I have to tell, and we're not outside. First, a big shout out to any of the scouts that are out there right now watching, because I know there are some. And thanks again, Lynette, also for the congratulations on the becoming Chief Scout of Canada. That's brand new, very, very fresh. We've had one big meeting since it was all named officially, and then I'm going to move forward from there. And I might even talk about that a little bit and let you know where that's going to go. But again, it still feels just a little weird to be. Here comes the comments. Good. There we go. Yes. Let us know if I'm going to interrupt myself a lot. It's easy to do that when we're doing these online sort of meet and greets like this, but it'd be so much different if I was just walking around by a campfire and you were all sitting around in a semicircle and we were hanging out in the woods. That would be awesome. And maybe one day we will be able to do that and get back to that, especially when I come down to Florida, for example. But for now, I know that questions coming up, I am going to try to keep my extra eye over on the comment section and get to questions that come up there. I know, Lynette, you have questions for me, and I'm excited for those. So, guys, I don't really do this in a kind of a presenty kind of way and just start talking about, a certain angle of what I want to say. I just like to tell stories. I like to answer questions and tell stories. And but I will, let's go back to the beginning a little bit. For me, wow. I know for some of you, this is almost a brand new connection to me. If you're just reading my books now or seeing the Survivorman films or Survivorman Bigfoot or my series that I'm very, very proud of called Beyond Survival, I have a brand new series out right now on PBS presented by American Public Television called Wild Harvest, all about gathering local wild edibles and then bringing them into the kitchen. I just did another new special called Surviving Disasters, which is pretty fitting when you consider all the storms and the things and the hurricanes and the tornadoes and the earthquakes that have been going on. And it's all about how to handle those. So in many ways, guys, for me, I've been doing this a very long time. For some of you, I'm a brand new person to watch, to listen to read. But my backdrop, I'll tell you this, to connect to you, let me say this much. First of all, there's this really bizarre cliche, I think, that I think people would like to, when you saw that picture of me up front, there was a thing of me that said Big Read, and I'm in my bandana, I'm all rugged and I'm dirty and I'm out in the outdoors. And I think that there's like a mythology behind Survivorman and Les Stroud and everything I've done that leads you to maybe want to think that I was raised by wolves, or I grew up in the woods, or my parents had me on dangerous canoe trips when I was 5 years old. Full disclosure, truth of the matter, I was probably very much like every single one of you. I grew up in the suburbs. I was just a bored kid in a boring little suburb, west end of Toronto, up in Canada. I'm Canadian, for those of you who don't know, although I spent half my time in the United States. And I did not have any influences to the outdoors. And I will say this, I will be a little bit candid and personal and say I did not have a good background, a good parenting, if you will. I had really very little to zero mentorship or guidance or teachings that way. So I was had to work my own way up through a very, very kind of benign, kind of boring sort of childhood. But what I discovered first was actually, maybe not ironically, television. And I watched, there was an explorer called Jacques Cousteau. In fact, there's a brand new documentary out right now on Disney Plus called Discovering Cousteau, and I went and watched it and kind of relived my past a bit. An amazing man, but that watching Jacques Cousteau dive in the ocean and teach of the natural world just captured my imagination. So you gotta picture the scene, right? I'm just a kid in a suburb in a living room on the floor playing with my little dinky cars, watching Jacques Cousteau on TV, watching Tarzan movies on TV, Tarzan and the Ape Man, and watching a series called Wild Kingdom. And that is what really fascinated me. And it really became full circle later on when you think about what I've done with Survivorman. In many ways, all Survivorman ever really was, for me, was the perfect hybrid between becoming Jacques Cousteau and Tarzan together at the same time. I'm out filming my adventures and telling the stories, and I'm out being a guy in the jungle living the adventure. And so in many ways, I have been able to achieve everything that I wanted to achieve as a young dreamer, a kid without much in the way of, as they would say, in the way of prospects, which is to say that really my life should not have been adventuring. It should not have been as a successful television producer or author or musician. It should have been, I should have just been working in a job that I hated and, waiting for the weekend. But it didn't. It became something much bigger. And all of that was due in part to just a burning desire within myself to become something other than what I was, to go somewhere other than where I was. And I really focused on that inside. And it took a long time. I'm a late bloomer, guys. I'm a real late bloomer. My first canoe trip, I was 26 years old on my first canoe trip. And then I, eventually became an outdoor guide and a canoe instructor. So I was a very late bloomer, which is to say there's always time. There's always time to get on that road and get to the places where you want to be. As you can tell, I'm kind of riffing as I speak because I don't like to do presentations. I like to kind of hang with you and talk and tell stories. And that's been sort of the beauty of what's been fun for me as Survivorman is I've been able to simply go out and do something like survive in the jungle, maybe the Amazon jungle, and get chased by a jaguar, or stumble down a snowy mountainside in Norway, or walk across the scorched deserts of the Kalahari, or take part in ceremonies in South Africa, or play on stage with big rock stars. All of those things I've been able to do, yet I never should have been able to do those things if you really think about my backdrop. But I've been able to do it simply because I willed it into. I knew there was a way. Someday I will find a way to be able to do it, and I just learned to have a really strong instinct for making decisions. I'll summarize this part of my little chat here by saying I think what I was able to do was by getting away from the things that I didn't want to do as a teenager, as a 20-something, as a pre-teenager, that automatically defaulted me to go to the places where I did want to be. So I didn't really know how to get to those places, but I could figure out how to avoid these places. And that ended up pushing me over there. And that's kind of how it all fell into place for me as a person, just as a man, as an individual. And that led me to, and I know this is, one of the reasons why we're here today is because, and I will show it, the new book. But first, a number of years ago, I was able to write my book, Survive. So that's a manual that I wrote on survival. I will say that I had a lot of fun writing that book. And I put it up against any survival book out there, page by page. I could argue that all the day long about why my Survive manual is page for page. I think still one of the best books out there for doing what? For doing what I wanted always to do with you guys in the first place: get you connected to nature. See, that's all I ever really wanted to do, was to connect people to nature. Survival skills were a facilitation. They were a way of me giving you skills, showing you skills, teaching you skills, because that's all I was really ever doing with Survivorman was teaching. I didn't have to think about trying to become a TV star or big producer. I just had to think about how to teach you how to do the firebow, how to build a shelter, how to make a signal. That's all. And as long as I knew how to operate a camera, I filmed myself doing it. Turns out I have the gift for gab, so I was able to talk and speak and share my stories. And so when writing this Survive manual, I just wanted it to be straightforward to enable you to be able to get out into nature and connect with nature. That has been really the bottom line of everything I've ever done. So never mind the fancy stuff and the exciting stuff. I just keep wanting people to connect to nature. And I even tangent a little bit as I look outside my window and I think about even in my sort of more domestic life, where I live right now. I have a couple of acres, and it was a scrubby field, and it would be cut. The grass would be cut once a year. So now it's like a tree arboretum with I have 27 bird feeders and 17 bird boxes. I have 200 birds that join me for coffee every morning. I have all kinds of things growing, trees, local indigenous trees that I encourage to grow, and wildflowers. And I'm going to be putting in a beehive. It's amazing. And that is just another example of me always saying, no matter where I go, no matter what I do, I just want you to connect to nature. I remember I had a woman one time ask me, she said, I have a 6-year-old daughter, and how do I with this, and I do it with a 6-year-old. I said, well, do you happen to have a backyard? And we don't all have backyards, but there are parks down the street. She said, yes, I have a backyard. Okay, you have some grass and natural bushes and things or anything? Well, yeah, there's like a bush. I said, okay. Then let your daughter go out and sit on the lawn. Let her get her fingers into the mud after it rains. Let her accidentally pull up a worm and it breaks off and she comes in crying. Let her connect with whatever natural world is around you. So as much as I've been to the mountains of Peru and the Amazon jungle and the high Arctic, I'm also very, very big on you guys connecting to nature where you live, right where you are, right around the corner, right in your backyard. There's always nature to connect to. And there's always nature to allow to let grow. That's what I did with my yard here. It was very well manicured when I showed up. Some people might not like the way it looks now. I love it. And because, as my wife would point out, she wasn't sure. I said, let me go with it. Just let me run with it. It took me about 3 years. Now, our yard is the most alive yard there is of anywhere around. It's vibrating with life and energy because I just allowed nature to come out and show itself. And again, I'm tangenting all over the place. So let me get to the book. This book, Wild Outside, so honored by Anik Press in Toronto to have worked together with me to produce this book. And rather than put up slides and everything, I'm just going to hold it and show you as I go through it. Oh, yes, I did autograph them all. It is filled with all kinds of things that you can do out in nature yourself. So I give you tips for things you can do out there. I tell you all kinds of stories. There's beautiful illustrations, and I get into the places where I have been, the adventures I lived out, the survival things that I had to, components I had to enact to make it out there and to survive and do well. And I walk you through, say, one of my, like the story where I got chased up a tree by a moose. So I got chased up a tree by a bull moose in Northern Ontario. That's not on a Survivorman show. You can't see that one. But I tell that story here, and I tell you all of the lessons I learned. Then I give you things you can do based on an experience like that yourself out in nature. And not always big nature. You could go out and do most of these things just in your backyard or your friend's backyard or a park down the street, if you happen to live in a condo or an apartment or something like that. And Lynette, I'm closing in on, I'm like I always do. I just go off on these crazy tangents because I just love speaking about nature so much. So Lynette, I'm going to bring you back on in just a second here, by saying though that this is really what I've always been about, everyone. I'm not out there to be a survival guru or a TV star, or play my music to be a rock star, or write my books to be a big celebrated author. I'm just always looking for the ways to say, you know what, I don't have the answers to a lot of things. We're living in very strange times, as everyone knows. But I do feel that for me, and maybe for a lot of us, if not all of us, that at least a partial answer will always be connecting to nature. It will always be finding out that way to get in touch with the natural world, to listen to it, to smell it, taste it, touch it, experience it, feel it. And when you do that, whether you want to or not, you're experiencing healing, de-stressing, strengthening. That's just what it does. And that's not me speaking all wooey. That's science. That's just science is proving that. Here's a case, an example. They've proven that a patient in a hospital room will heal faster and require less painkillers if they can simply see a tree outside their window. Think about that. Just by seeing a tree. That's why we have pictures of nature in our homes, by the way. Something called biophilia, our interconnection to nature, our inherent desire to connect with nature. Well, imagine how much more you can feel strengthened if you're out in nature. So again, big shout out to the scouts that are watching right now. And Lynette, I'm going to bring you back on because as you can tell, I've had a coffee, which makes me really verbose, which is really talkative. And I'll go on forever about all kinds of things. But I want to get to your questions and just let's share some stories and have some fun. So Lynette, please come on back on. There you are. Hello.
Here I am. Thank
And
you.
yeah, I'm willing to take on some questions. In fact, before you, I know you have a list of questions, but I'm seeing the very first one there by Kevin Lopez. Is there, and I'll answer that. Is there a place I've always wanted to explore? Yes, there is, Kevin. And let me tell you what the answer to that question is. It's a place that I almost got to. I was arranging to go there to film a Survivorman episode. But back in the day, before drones, we used helicopters to get the aerial shots. Now, of course, I'm out there all alone doing my thing, but there's a crew that is getting beauty shots. So sunrises, sunsets, bumblebees, trees blowing in the wind. And they would go in a helicopter and do these aerial shots. And we would put them into the edit to fill out the show to make it look beautiful and show you where I am. Okay. Where I wanted to go, the helicopter costs were so expensive. Like I will tell you what they were. It would have been $37,000 to rent a helicopter to get you 2 minutes or 1 minute of on-screen aerial time. And it's like, well, that's just ridiculous. It's the Himalayan mountains. I wanted to go to Tibet and spend time in Tibet in the Himalayan mountains, and I never got there. And I still want to go. I understand now. Unfortunately, the rules have become really strict. You can't just wander aimlessly there anymore. But there you go. That's the answer to your question, Kevin, is the Himalayan mountains. Lynette, over to you.
Yes, well, thank you so much for talking a little bit about your inspiration on what kind of got you going down the path of learning survival skills. I was definitely going to ask you that because I was very curious. And I'm wondering, one of my questions was about the fact that, so I loved Survivorman. So I remember you from Survivorman. My husband and I used to watch your show all of the time. And the fact that you went out into nature by yourself, filmed yourself, did all of that was just amazing. And I'm wondering, you talked about how your purpose is to connect people with nature. One of my questions was, why did you want to do it all yourself? And I'm wondering if it connects to the fact that you wanted people to connect with nature, maybe the best way to do that was to be on your own, or if you want to talk a little bit about the decision on going down that path.
Yeah, you've just led me down an interesting thought process that I've never gone down before. Because as you were asking it, you triggered something in me. And I realized that there's one way to answer that question, and I've answered it sort of before, but you've triggered something else. There's really kind of two ways to answer that question. And the first way is that pragmatically speaking, I needed to be able to show what I wanted to do was tell an actual survival story and to really be in a survival situation. If I have a crew there filming me, it's not really survival. I'm talking to them, I see them, the emotion, everything, the psychology is completely changed. And after 3 days of not eating, if the camera person says, "Hey man, you want this chocolate bar?" Yeah, I'm going to say yes, I'm human, right? So I'm going to cheat, right? And so I realized that right away, it's important that I go out and do what I've always been doing, which was teaching survival and all of that. I got to be alone or it's not really anything. And which, by the way, creatively speaking, meant that in the beginning, in the edits, I'm tangenting here, but I had to then say, I need to show for everyone. I didn't need to show everybody that I'm actually alone or they're going to think there's a camera crew because I'm using 3, 4, 5 cameras. And if we cut between the cameras, they're going to think there's different camera people filming me. How do I do that? And then I realized, well, put the camera, let them see me filming myself with my other camera, position the camera so everybody, oh, I see what he's doing. He's got all these cameras laid out around him. And Sure enough, the cameras aren't moving. They're just cutting between the shots. I even had an argument with my first editor because he was trying to edit it like, oh no, you can't show the cameras, Les. No, but it's called breaking down the fourth wall. You can't show them, right? And I said, and I argued with him. I said, no, you must show them because it's part of my story. It's really important people see I am actually alone. I don't have a camera person with me. So that was number one. That's the pragmatic. But as there's something that you've touched on there, Lynette, is as I think about it, you're right. There is a more larger, I don't want to say spiritual, but there's more of a sort of a spiritual approach to the thought that to connect with nature, the minute I'm with somebody else, it's a much different type of connection. So let me point that out. Your alone time in nature, it's one thing. If you go out and you're on a ropes course or a canoe trip or a big adventure or a big hike or a big climb, and you're with friends and that, and you're in nature, it is wonderful. But I will say that's not the real connecting to nature I'm talking about. There's a big difference between that and just sitting on a stump in the forest by yourself. There is a big, big difference. And there is huge value in being alone in nature safely with skills, so you know where you are, even if it's the park down the street, and being there alone and sitting. That is more, they call it, for example, Shinrin Yoku, which is forest bathing. I believe in that. That is more what I'm referencing here. And I think, Lynette, that I inherently realized for me to get next level in what I was filming as Survivorman. So it's one thing to say, here's how to do a firebow. It's another thing for me to say, but here's how you center yourself emotionally and intellectually. And that second part the answer was, I need to be alone. Now, along the way, I took my son on some of the survival episodes I shot. I did one where I took a fan out there who won a contest, so I did start to have some fun with it. But you're right. And I'm glad you asked the question the way you did, because I've never had it asked that way before. And it's giving me pause to think about it in a whole other way. That's my answer.
Thank you so much. We have gotten several questions in our comments. Kevin Lopez asks, is the danger of the wild always on your mind, or is it something you easily ignore?
Oh, thank you, Kevin. Always on my mind. You never ignore it. And that's why, when all the other copycat shows came along, if you will, sorry for those of you if you enjoy them, but they never really they just don't actually do it. They didn't actually survive. That's why they could be more exciting and in your face and all this stuff's going on. But with me, no, the danger is always present. That's why I walk slowly and cautiously and watched where I stepped. That's why I taught you things, for example, in the jungle, you don't, in North America, you step over branches, not on them, because if you step on them, like say a log, and it breaks, you could snap an angle. That's a dangerous thing for survival. In the Amazon jungle, you step on them, you don't step over them. Why? What's the difference? You still snap your ankle. Yeah, but in the jungle, if you step over them, the likely case for there to be a fertile snake is underneath that log, and it lunges out and bites you as you step over. So that's why I taught simple things like that. So you got to move cautiously. And so, yes, Kevin, the danger is always on my mind, not in a paranoid or fearful way, just in a skillful, hey, let's be careful here. Let's be cautious. I mean, I'm a whitewater canoeist, so I do love some of the adrenaline moves. Don't get me wrong. And there's even some adrenaline and adventure. Now I'm a search and rescue consultant in Oregon in the United States. And there is adrenaline and adventure to that. But yes, you want to always have it on your mind in a clear and cautious way.
You mentioned different survival shows, and I was curious about the one show that I've seen recently that I feel is like, I don't know, very close to Survivorman is the Alone show. I don't know if you've seen the Alone show at all, where they go out by themselves and they film themselves. It's a reality TV show. Of course, there's a cash prize at the end of it. But they, this idea of being alone in nature is kind of makes me think a little bit of Survivorman and what you started.
Well, I'll give you some behind the scenes, a little insider information. I've always It's no secret I've been quite critical of most, if not all, survival shows that came along after. And that's not out of bitterness or jealousy. It's just that they can't do what I did. They fake it. It's all staged and set up. Alone, you'll be happy to hear, for the most part, is different. And I've met some of the Alone contestants, wonderful people, really into what they're doing. I also know the Alone head survival instructor. Do you know what they do before they go out and embark on filming that series? All of the contestants meet at a boot camp. You know what they do there? They watch the Survivorman series. That's from them. That's what them telling me, right? Well, the problem I don't give Alone full marks, though, simply because the problem I have there is not anything to do with the people who are actually out there doing their survival. They truly are suffering out there, and they're going through it. The problem is in the last 25% of it is where it hands off to the television producers who go to Los Angeles or New York or wherever they're producing the show. And then they mix and match the story and the moments and whatever's caught on camera to tell whatever story they think they want to tell. So you're not getting a lot of amazing things that happened on Alone. I know one fellow caught 5 fish. They didn't show it because it didn't look like he was suffering.
Mm.
So you see, I like to tell these stories so that people viewing, I will tell you, I've never been interested in, as this is an old saying, is feeding pablum to the masses. I'm not interested in that. I would rather elevate. I'd rather take you to a place that causes you to think a little deeper and elevates where you're going intellectually and emotionally. And so a lot of these shows would rather just hand out pablum to the masses, which is to say, just give you whatever you want. And so with the series Alone, unfortunately, rather than telling you the powerful, beautiful story of this one guy who made a fish net and caught 5 fish with it, they just threw all that footage out because they didn't want you, the viewer, to see what he'd done, because it didn't look like he was suffering. And that's the pablum, right? That's pablum for the masses is like porridge for the masses. How about that? We say it that way. Baby food for the masses, right? And they wanted to see you to see him suffering. So as you could tell, I could go on a long ways. In fact, I'm releasing a video. Hey, by the way, I'm releasing a video on YouTube right after this. I just got to finish editing it. It'll be on by this afternoon or this evening your time. And it's all about where to pick your shelter location. And in it, I talk about The Revenant, for example. So there's survival movies out there too. And a little spoiler alert, they get it all wrong. But you have to watch my video on my YouTube channel to see that. You can get me going on this one, Lynette.
Oh, yeah.
So don't get me started.
Well, I'm going to move on to, because we've got a bunch of questions over here. A asks, would you ever think about taking people who are inexperienced in nature and take them out on a life-changing adventure trek for 3 days?
The short answer, A, is that I did that for many years, a lot of times, and I really enjoyed it. Not so much now, though, kind of, yeah. Now it's more, I have other life to live in that, but every once in a while that opportunity comes along. Some group gets together and say, hey, we'd like to hire you to do this. And I say, you know what, I'm actually free that weekend. Sure, let's do it. So it depends on the circumstances. The short answer is yes. For
And
sure.
I think there's a second part to that, like an idea for a show.
Here's the most horrible answer of all. I can't take ideas because then I become liable. And it's a horrible professional filmmaking thing. You're not supposed to listen to ideas from other people, because then if you do something similar later on, then you get sued. Sorry. By the way, the next one Kevin is asking was Survive This, a fun experience. Survive This is a show that I did with kids, and I would do that again in a heartbeat. For business reasons, it's not going to be able to happen, but I loved doing Survive This. So short answer on that question, absolutely. That was one of the most fun things that I did. It's a TV series. You can still catch it online, I think, or on different networks.
Right. And then let's see, Morris RTM asks, what was harder to deal with, the loneliness or the cold?
Very difficult question to answer. Never been asked that one. I'm going to answer quickly and say it's kind of a tie, because loneliness is crushing, but cold is painful. And I've often said, one of the questions that comes up often is, where is the most difficult place to survive? It's not about geography. It's about temperature. I don't care where you put me. If it's below freezing, it's going to be rough. If it's 70 degrees, I got forgiveness time. I can figure it out, even if it's a rough place to be. So cold hurts and is painful, but loneliness is crushing, and loneliness can kill you, believe it or not, because it stops you from being motivated to better your circumstances.
Mm-hmm. A asks, so what was the hardest survival skill you had to master?
Oh, the firebow. Yeah, I was some of you are like, oh, I got the firebow in the weekend. I didn't. It took me a long time. Now I was learning it in tough ways. Like, for example, walk out in the bush right now. See, I know there's a scout group watching. And so if I was your instructor, I'd say, okay, let's go to the forest right now, find what you need right now, come back right now. And over the course of the next 4 or 5 hours and make a fire. Really hard. Those of us who teach the firebow, guess what we do? We show up with our kit. Here's my spindle and my fireboard, and I get everything ready. And now I look like a guru. Like, oh my God, whoa, look at him. He builds. I went from first turn to flame in 17 seconds. So I hold the record amongst my survival cronies. But it was like inside, super dry material. The tough part is to go out on your own, just to go out and say, I'm going to do a firebow today, starting from scratch. That is the hardest thing I've ever done in my life.
You kind of alluded to movie scenes, and I was curious, what do you think is like the most ridiculous or unbelievable survival scene scenario you've ever seen in a movie?
Oh, where do you want me to begin? I did. I had a magazine. I think it was GQ, and then there was Wired. I did some, like, they're online. You can see it. Les Stroud talks about survival movies. There, they brought up the movies, and I just commented on them. But certainly in The Revenant, the whole climb inside the animal to stay warm thing is pretty. Is these things that are even written about in books. You could do this, and it's like a lot of times, and that's why, when I wrote my manual, I wanted to address stuff like that and say, yeah, no, you're not just going to walk along and find a zebra waiting for you to crawl inside and stay warm and sleep. Doesn't work that way. Out in nature, it's so much different. It's much more benign out there, really, in many ways. It's not there to get you, and it's not there to help you. So crawling inside an animal after going off the cliff in The Revenant was silly. The one with Anthony Hopkins and the grizzly bear throwing they're throwing all these burning sticks out around, throw them out in a circle to keep the grizzly away. Of course, those all would have, for the most part, gone out the way they were throwing them. There's so many, Lynette. Survival. You know what? Everyone will recognize this. If you're a professional in anything, a doctor, a lawyer, a law enforcement person, a survival instructor, and you watch films in your industry, including Grey's Anatomy, any doctor at home is watching Grey's Anatomy going, oh, for goodness sakes. That's the truth of it. Hollywood never gets it
right. Okay, let me go back here. There's definitely some more questions over here.
Well, I can pick one for you, Lynette. There's one there,
please.
From Jules Leggett. Are there any choices I would make differently on Survivorman if I could go back? Wow. I would have to say kind of no. No, that there kind of isn't. I'm really proud of the way it all worked out. And I think the reason for that, Jules, is that I let it all play itself out organically. I never tried to force the issue. The most inventing I had to do was a current scenario. So let's see, what haven't I done? Oh, I've never been stuck in a car before. Let's go get stuck in a car in the snow in Norway on a mountaintop. Okay, now I've set my scenario. The rest is all natural. Well, what might be in the car? Okay, those things might be in the car. Okay. Now, what could I do with them? And I just go from that way. So in many ways, and I don't want to seem, vain about it, like, oh, I did it all right. It's just that really, I go back and I mean, if you and I sat and watched a Survivorman episode, I'd probably go, oh my goodness, I never should have done that. But but thinking about it from memory's sake right now, I'm quite proud of the way it worked out, and I don't think I would change Survivor. And you know what, Jules? I think that's the reason why Survivorman still works today, and why new fans are finding it today, because it was organic and straight and real, and there was no. It wasn't even bound to an era or a time. It just was what it was. I'm going to teach you these things, and these skills are everlasting. So it didn't have to change.
Are there I think of questions that come up, like if you're in a situation and should you stay where you're at, or should you try to get out? Should you leave? You'd always see people debating on, is it better to stay where you're at and hope someone will come and find you, or should you try to find your way out of, being lost in the wilderness? Is there any standard answer for that, or is it very situational depending on what you have and where you are? And
That is the standard answer. Variables. It depends. It depends, right? Because originally you might hear that like, oh, sit by a tree, never move. Well, it depends. Are you in imminent danger of bad weather? Where you're sitting, is it likely that no one will ever look there? No, it's really situationally dependent. And so what I've always taught is to learn how to do your 3 zones of assessment. So you pick the three zones are your body. The second zone, number 2, is the area close at hand, and zone number 3 is the area further afield. And you take into account everything within those 3 zones of assessment, and then you make a decision, and that decision needs to lead to proactivity. Sometimes that proactivity means staying put. Sometimes that proactivity means you need to get hiking. So yeah, there is no one answer to that. It's like another form of that question is, what's the best survival tool to take out into the wilderness with you? It depends. Where are you going? What's the weather? What's the terrain? Right? If I'm going to be in Ontario in the springtime, my best survival item? A bug jacket. Mm-hmm. Right? If I'm going to be in the cold, it's going to be about fire starting. If I'm in Arizona desert in the summer, you can practically look at wood and it ignites, right? So I don't need to worry so much about fire starting there. There's going to be water, or a way of getting water. So it all depends on the scenario. And survival is like that. You can't do the magazine format. The top 3 things are. It doesn't work that way. You got to get into it.
I have a question about plants, and can you, Kevin Lopez is asking, can you tell just by looking at them what plants are edible?
Nope, not a chance. And in fact, any sort of cliche things like if it's red, you're dead. If it's white, you're all right. Or if the birds are eating them, you're okay to eat them. And so none of that is true. Every plant will defy that, and you'll go to eat something you think is going to be edible and it'll be toxic or poisonous. So this is a great segue to the fact that I have a brand new series called Wild Harvest. It's on PBS stations right now, on all of them almost. It's like 99% of their stations are covering it. And I take you out into the field and I teach you wild edible plants. And then I have an amazing chef who takes them into the kitchen and works with them. I would say to you, Kevin, that my favorite survival subject matter, bar none, it's not fire starting, or shelter building, or signal fire making, or hide tanning, or hunt. It's edible wild plants. That will always be my favorite skill when it comes to survival. So yeah, that's my answer. No, you can't tell just by looking. And what is more difficult, shooting a show alone or actually surviving shooting a show solo or actually surviving a situation? Another good question from Morris TM. It's a battle between the two, because when I'm out there, if the survival is rough going, I have to concentrate on the survival, which means my filmmaking suffers. If I get a moment of reprieve where, hey, the weather's okay and I've got some food and some things have happened, now I can concentrate more on the filmmaking, have some fun there. It's a constant back and forth. It's like a tennis game between the two. Depending on which one will take over. I have to film everything or there's no point in me being there. But I also have to survive, and I'm actually out there trying to survive. So, sometimes it's like, well, forget the camera. I just gotta catch this fish. I'll try to set it up, but more, you know, if I'm going to miss this opportunity, I'll have to show it later on camera, you know? So it's tough. It's tough. I go between the two.
Are there things that you have learned while being in the wilderness and surviving that are life lessons that you have applied to your non-survival life? Just, you know, in general, things that you learn that benefit just day-to-day
Yeah,
living.
not in as a profound way as you might want me to articulate. Not so much that, like, oh, I realize that life is about this. Not so much that, because for one thing, I'm very busy out there, either filmmaking or surviving. But I learned, I suppose, and I don't want to say I learned how to be with myself, because honestly, it's lonely. I don't like being just alone out there. All, you know, that part of filming Survivorman wasn't so great. Maybe that's one of the things that I did learn about myself, was that, you know, I actually do like people. You know, I'm a gregarious person, and you know, I do enjoy being around people, and so as much fun as I had as a creator, and being on, you know, 60 times now out there alone, you know, it's like, no, I need to be around people. I enjoy that. And that was you know, I think given the state of the world and the state of affairs and things going on, the thing that I've often tried to point to is saying, look, everybody, just learn how to pivot. This is a time to learn how to pivot. It's not going our way. It's not going the way you want. Just learn to pivot. Just do that, you know. And for me, that was a pivot for me. It was a pivot to understand that, you know, I need to invest a little more in community, and I need to invest a little more in people around me, because I, you know, pull energy from them as well, sort of thing. So I did definitely learn that. I'm going to answer Morris's question there. Was I ever pressured to make Survivorman more crazy, exciting? Absolutely. That, Morris, is how the genre then started, because Survivorman was a hit show and nothing else was on like it. And they sat me down, they being the TV network executives, for a year, and wanted me to inject new drama, no, it has to be more this and more that. And you know what? You don't need to actually do it. Just stay in a hotel, go out and film the scenes and go back. Like, you're fine. You don't need to. And I just kept saying, nope, you don't get it. Nope, that's not the way this works. Nope. And then after about a year, they said, fine, forget him. And they created another show with a guy who they flew over from the UK, and they just said, okay, fine, we'll do whatever we want. And we're going to look at Survivorman shows. We're just going to create a bunch of crazy scenarios, and we're going to pretend like he's actually alone, which, by the way, they did do at first. So no, that me saying no to the pressure, a lot of pressure to fake my show and make it more ta-da, is in many ways was how the genre then went from there. Because they just, once I had the concept stolen, if you will, the first time, then that's it. The barn gates were open, sort of thing. And I see someone's put up the link to wildharvestfilms.com. That's the website. Yep. And you can see Wild Harvest on my YouTube. By the way, we haven't got there, Lynette, but everything I do, guys, is on for free on YouTube. I put it all up there on Survivorman, Les Stroud on the YouTube channel. Okay, back to you, Lynette.
I was wondering, like, one of the things I thought of when I would be watching Survivorman is, like, what you were doing was difficult already, just surviving, but then you were also dealing with all of this camera equipment. Did having to film yourself and deal with that equipment, did that add a extra layer of danger to what you were doing, or complication or challenge?
It's a good question, because I like giving this answer so that people understand that in many ways, of course, I know I'm going home in 7 days. I'm there to make a TV show. I'm filming myself. Of course, I'm going to be all right. Am I in imminent danger? Sometimes, yes. Could I have perished out there and not been rescued? Many times, yes, that could have happened. But in the end, psychologically speaking, I know I'm going home. I know there's a crew of 2 or 3 people about 50 miles away, and they're filming the birds and the bees. So in many ways, putting on me the responsibility of having to lug around that camera gear, set the cameras up, make sure that, and at one point it was make sure there's a tape in the camera, then a card in the camera, make sure the batteries are, I've got enough battery power, make sure the lens is cleaned and I've got my microphone on correctly and all that stuff, and film myself. Well, that actually is very interruptive. All of my shelters are terrible. And they're terrible because I can't focus on making the shelter. I have to film myself making the shelter. So I'm always a split mind when I'm doing these survival things. So in many ways, I feel like, well, granted, I know I'm going home, and you could criticize me for saying, well, you're going home. It's not really survival. Say that's true. But on the other hand, I have to do all this filming. So I have this other disadvantage. And I always felt like they kind of equaled each other out. The advantage of knowing psychologically I'm there to make a film was then disadvantaged by the fact that I had to make the film when I could have been making my shelter instead.
I would imagine, were there a lot of things that happened that you weren't able to film when you're like, oh, I wish I was able to film this, but you were in the middle of something else? And
yeah, like an animal going by, for example. Lots of times some wild animal might happen upon me and go by, and I wouldn't be able, it's too late by the time I get the camera up.
Were you, what was was there a situation where, or actually, what would be the scariest situation, do you think, that you've been in?
Well, the scariest was being chased by a bull moose in Canada, which I tell about in my new children's book, Wild Outside. That was the scariest. The most dangerous, though not that wasn't dangerous, but the most dangerous was going down the hillside in the Survivorman episode I shot in Norway, because I became hypothermic, into the stages of hypothermia. And I was in real danger. I was coming up against cliffs that were 100 feet down that were covered in ice. I was in, from 10 feet down to 3 feet of snow that was wet snow and freezing rain. I was soaked to the bone with sweat and freezing rain. So that was really dangerous. Those are my two top. I also got heat stroke in the Kalahari Desert. That would be like number 3. But the two top were being chased by the moose. And the hypothermia, not so much being chased by the jaguar in the jungle, although I don't really want to think too much about how dangerous that one was.
But it doesn't make you it doesn't make you fear going out into the wilderness or surviving again, those kind of situations?
Oh, no, the machismo guy in me wants to say nah. But the reality is, even if I were to go out tonight, in truth, it always still takes me 3 nights to get comfortable again. For about 3 days and 3 nights, I'm still kind of watching over my shoulder, still a little nervous at night, still a little nervous in the dark. That does dissipate, though. I mean, I'm pretty comfortable. If you challenged me and said, Les, walk out into the bush behind my house tonight at midnight without a flashlight, I could do it. Fine. That's the machismo part. But the truth is, on the first night, I would still be quite nervous. It doesn't, if you're in it all the time, it definitely dissipates. You become very, very comfortable. You'll do anything in the middle of the night anywhere. You won't care anymore. But in the beginning, it takes a while.
Mm-hmm. I have a question here from A. They want to know, what is the one place you will never go back to?
Oh, never go back. I thought it said
never.
I wanted to go back to. Never go back. Oh, no, one place I will never go back to. I'll never go back, never go back, never go back. I will tell you, A, that probably there is no place that I will never go back to, because I've been to so many amazing places. Why wouldn't I want to go back? I will say that I prefer survival in the jungle or the Arctic over the desert. I found the desert it's always dry. It's a different kind of sweating. I love the desert. It's very beautiful, but I prefer the Arctic, or I prefer the jungle. I don't think that there's a place that I would never go back to. Although in my world of adventuring, so I have a series called Beyond Survival, where I went and I survived with indigenous cultures around the world, and I did ceremonies with them, and that's on my YouTube channel. You just go to the playlists and you find the Beyond Survival playlist. And through doing that, I would go to places in Indonesia and Asia and Malaysia, and I've been to some places that are horrifyingly polluted, and that's really heartbreaking for me to go to and I have no desire to go back to Koh Samui, on places that are just so polluted that you just lose faith in humanity in a way. That's what turns me. But nature, no, I would always go back to, I still go, I have a place in Canada called Temagami, Ontario, which is the mecca for canoeing. And I own a cottage there, but a little cabin. I paddle those rivers any day of the week, just always go back. So there's always yeah, you always go back to nature. There's no place I go, I don't want to be here anymore.
We have another question from Morris RTM. Why did you normally choose to not trap or kill animals during Survivorman?
So good question, Morris. Internal battle, internal. Do I really need to do this? I'm doing this because I'm filming a series. I guess if I want to dig into that a little deeper, I would say that first of all, I am not opposed to hunting for sustenance. I'm not opposed to fishing for sustenance. I know nobody wants me to get political here, but I will say that anything to do with trophyism does not hold water with me. I'm not for anything to do with trophy scenarios, but for sustenance, for eating, well, to me, that's just a good skill set to learn and to know. But as a person, as I said, if you brought me, when someone's actually bringing me some elk to eat, and I know this person hunts very respectably, they don't just go out willy-nilly, right? And yes, I do get how emotional that can all be, and I do understand the emotions behind such a situation. I'm not a vegan. I do eat kind of a lot like that in many ways, because I need my wildlife that might be taken to be taken in a way that is incredibly respectful. I need to know there was respect behind the meat that I eat. And so when I used to hunt myself, that had to be a big part of it. But the soft side of me is truth. I just have a hard time pulling the trigger anymore. I'd rather just film an elk than shoot it with a gun or a bow and arrow. But as I said, I don't want to be a hypocrite about it. So when I did Survivorman, still in this kind of frame of mind, knowing that I was going to teach how to use a deadfall and kill a squirrel and eat it, to me, it was very pragmatic. It was specific to, look, here are things you can learn how to do that would save your life. So in the end, it was about how can I show you things that are going to save your life. For example, if I was lost and possibly going to die, and I was on an island, I'd burn the island down just so I could be saved and go see my kids again. You see what I'm saying? What were you talking about? Hey, I'm talking about my life. I was on an island. Yes, I'm sorry. I started a forest fire, but I'm alive. The saying is, I'd rather be tried by 12 than carried by 6. It's the same thing with the hunting. I taught it in many cases on Survivorman to show you this was a skill set you can have and learn and use it to save your life. But is it easy for me to pull the trigger? No, it's not even easy for me to bang a largemouth bass on the back of the head with a club if I've been fishing. Yeah, I was like, sorry, so, that's all. And I answer the question this way because I've seen some smart aleck posts of people going, oh, why are you being such a wimp about it? It's like, you know what? Because I respect it. I respect the life of that animal. I respect the life of that fish. You want me to go even further? I respect the life of that plant. How far do we want to go? There's science behind the sentience of all of nature now. And I'm going down that road because I do believe that there is a greater sentience out there, and they're proving it and showing it. So at some point, no matter what, as a species, we must kill to live. So whether you're killing a broccoli plant or a rabbit, you're still killing. So we must respect that process and understand that we need it. So that is why it wasn't that I chose not to trap or kill. I did. There's many episodes you will see it. That's one answer. Let me answer another one really quickly, Lynette. There's one other side to that I want to answer from Morris, and it's this. Hunting and trapping and fishing in a survival situation is vastly unrealistic. People think you're going to take a string and go out and catch a deer. It's not like, you don't walk around in the woods and there's wildlife jumping out at you saying, eat me, eat me. It doesn't work that way. Most of the time, you're just kind of groveling. It's easier to find a stream and gather up a bunch of fresh clams than it is to catch a fish, unless you've got fishing gear. So the true reality of survival and hunting and fishing is that hunting and fishing in a survival situation without any gear, remember that, no gear, you're tired, you're hungry, you're scared, you're alone, you got to get through the night. What, you're just going to go out and hunt a deer? Not going to happen. And all the times I've been out there, the amount of times that I can't think of one time an animal just came and gave itself up for me. So there's two answers to your question, and I hope you understand both.
A question about so there is an episode in the TV show The Office titled Survivorman. Are you aware of the show? Have you seen that episode?
Say which one? Oh, The Office.
In The Office.
I'll tell you the story. I got a phone call from the producers of The Office, and they said, by the way, the Office episode called Survivorman is one of only 2 episodes that Steve Carell himself wrote. And he said, Steve's written this episode called Survivorman. He's a big fan of your show, and we want to make sure it's okay. And could we even get some footage? I was actually supposed to be on the episode. I said, not only is it okay, I mean, I'll come and do a cameo. That would be great. Steve would love that. Okay. And we started talking, and I was going to go do a cameo on the episode. And then the writer's strike in Hollywood hit. And because it was legalities, they weren't actually allowed to change the script. That would have gone against the writer's, it's crazy and complicated, but it would have gone against the writer's strike. So they said, we're really sorry. We just have to go with the script we have. We're not allowed to make any alterations. I know, weird, eh? It's like, just write it. You can't, legally speaking. And so they did. And I was fast forward that to Lynette, I actually saw that episode as it aired on television, sitting just with a friend in an apartment watching it. That was one of the most surreal moments I've ever had in my life. That happened, and I thought to myself, my goodness, maybe I made it. Maybe I've arrived. Wow. And then the King of the Hill did one as well, dedicated to Survivorman. Modern Family referenced it. Howard Stern referenced it. It just starts to go on and on, right? So, but that Office episode called Survivorman, season 4, and it aired when that show was in the peak of its fame and notoriety and numbers as far as ratings go. So yeah, I own it. I have it here. I don't watch it or anything, but I was thrilled and honored.
And that show, that's reached a whole new generation too. The Office, that has.
He even says, first he says, my wife and I used to watch this. Unfortunately, he called it a reality series, which, by the way, it's not. Survivorman's not a reality TV show. It's a documentary series. Big difference. Mm-hmm. And so he said that, but then later he even repeats it. He turns back in the car and he says, so Les Stroud, and he said my name. It's like to have someone famous say your name. You're like, oh my God, you just said my name. I mean, so, it never gets old. As a musician, being able to play on stage with some of my heroes, believe me, before I go on stage, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm about to go on stage with Alice Cooper. Oh, so you never lose the kid in you when these.
I'm so happy you mentioned your music, because I wanted to ask you about that. Because when I was doing research for, looking at you and looking what you were up to, and I came across a lot of videos where you were performing. I knew about the harmonica because you play the harmonica on Survivorman, but I wasn't aware of the other instrument, guitar, and what you've done with the guitar and playing with other musicians. So I wanted to know if you wanted to talk a little bit about that.
Oh, absolutely. And we do different things in our life. I've been a singer-songwriter since I was 14 years old. I have 7 albums out. They're all on Spotify. Les Stroud, or Les Stroud and the Campfire Kings, or Les Stroud and the Pikes, all on Spotify. And this year I have 3 albums coming out. But the thing is, Survivorman owned the day, right? Survivorman took over my life. It became what it became. But I continued to always be I wrote music for the show. I wrote the theme song. I wrote the theme song for Wild Harvest and Beyond Survival. it's always been there. But once I became Survivorman, now I have the danger of looking like Kevin Costner. It's like, oh yeah, you're a big star, and now we got to listen to your music. It's like, no, it's like music's just what I've always been doing. I'm a big fan of the blues and roots rock and progressive rock. My Mother Earth album has Slash on it and Steve Vai and Mindy Bear, and it's a bit of a progressive rock album. So it's always been there, always been a part of me. Now, when I played my harmonica on Survivorman, that was actually me trying to tell you, hey, I'm not just a one-trick pony, And then I would like play a harmonica and I'd play a quick riff. And I thought to myself, I know the musicians out there will listen and go, hey, he actually can play that thing. And you know what? One day I was about to go on stage with Johnny Lang, the blues guitar player, an amazing blues guitar player named Johnny Lang. And he said, I saw you play harmonica on Survivorman, and I thought, oh, that guy can play. I thought I'm going to have to meet you, and someday we'll have to play together. And then I went up on stage and played with him in front of an audience. So it was a little calculated on my part to say, look, I don't just make shelters and start fires with sticks here. I have other interests. And it's an interesting thing, is sort of more of a broad message to everybody out there, is that, if you're really zoned in and focused, that's okay. If all you ever want to do is solve math problems, be an engineer, play the piano, that's okay. But if you're like me, you have multi-interests, you multitask well, and that's me. So I'm not just a guy who builds shelters and does the fireball. I also, I enjoyed writing while outside to exercise that muscle, if you will, of composing the written word, which I love the written word. I'm also a musician. I have a lot of outside interests that are not survival. And I think that's healthy. And it's really healthy. And so you can see it on my YouTube channel. I go down different roads. I have a podcast right now called Surviving Life with Les Stroud. I talk to all kinds of people, musicians and just interesting people that do things. So that's important. I think if you are a person or a scout, if I'm talking to the scouts, or you're a young person, if you're like, well, I have like lots of things I like to do, that's okay. Don't let someone say, well, just pick one and focus, stay focused. You might not be the kind of person that should stay focused. I'm not. I don't stay focused on one thing. I like to do at least 2 things, if not 3. And I'm okay with that. If I try to do 4, it's too much. And sometimes I do. But 2 or 3 things, I got it.
Thank you so much, Les. We are officially over our, I really appreciate you being here with us. Is there anything else you'd like to let our viewers know before we officially come to a close?
Sure. I'd just like to say that, first of all, thank you guys for being big fans of my work and for watching Survivorman. If you want to see more, my YouTube is the place where I'm really focused. Sure, I do Instagram and all the rest, but I'm focused on YouTube. And I have all my filmmaking is up there, the catalog, the archives, it's all there. You go into the playlists. Secondly, am I doing new stuff? Will I do more Survivorman? Will I do more survival? Yes, for the YouTube channel. That's where I'm putting up new stuff. So right after this, I'm going up to have lunch. Then I'm finishing an edit on how to determine where to make your shelter. It's not about how to make a shelter. First of all, how do you figure out where to build it? So I'm doing it. It's an hour film almost just on that. And I'm putting that up. It'll be up in a few hours on my YouTube channel as a premiere. So I'm doing that. And I'm going to tell you that, as you can kind of tell, in spite of the fact that I had a coffee that's got me zippity doo-dah here, I actually still maintain a lot of energy to do a lot of things. And I will keep doing things for you and creating. That's the beauty of being a creator, is you get to create, Again, I'm really honored to be here. I'm a big fan of reading, huge fan. Yes, I listen to audiobooks once in a while, but I prefer to sit and pick up a book and hold the paper and smell it and feel it. So Orange County, I am honored that you've had me here. A big fan of libraries. I'm intending to actually eventually, when we're back in that stage, visit some libraries and do some wild harvest reading. So let's see if we can make that happen in your area down there. And guys, again, I'm just honored, Lynette. Thank you so much. The questions were wonderful. And please have me back, because this has been fun.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching. Subscribe to our YouTube channel to be the first to find out when we have new fun and informative videos for you. Orange County Library System is your place to learn, grow, connect.